Welcome back to the program. The Oscar-winning actress Cate Blanchett has played everything from a depressed socialite in Blue Jasmine to Katharine Hepburn in The Aviator to Queen Elizabeth I, and now she's about to take on one of the most important roles yet, UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador. The UN Refugee Agency has just named Blanchett to the position, and as we've been reporting, the most pressing humanitarian crisis of our time comes from Syria, with 12 million refugees since the war started 5 years ago, inside and outside the country. She's back in London after a visit to some of those refugees, and she joins me here on set. Cate, welcome to the programme.
Thank you, Christiane.
Am I right? Is it the most important role yet?
Well, one could say motherhood is perhaps the most important role, but it's a balance, isn't it? And for me, I mean, I've long been engaged remotely in the refugee crisis just as a human being. I mean, like millions of people around the world. And when UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, approached me and asked me a year ago, would I be a goodwill ambassador, I was I felt compelled to go on that journey with them. Because I think, as you suggest, it's, you know, the global displacement crisis is completely unprecedented, with 60 million people around the world.
It is huge.
And it's, I mean, those figures are very, very difficult to relate to, in a way. You feel very powerless. But in the last year, having gone on missions with the UNHCR and meeting these families, women, children, you know, single men firsthand, the points of connection, I think, and the stories that you hear, suddenly the human face and the points of, you know, the similarities between everyone become really apparent.
What was it like for you? Because you have just returned from visits to the camps. I mean, even before you were named, you had been to see the refugees out there in some of those camps in the frontline countries. What sort of struck you the most? What was something that you didn't expect, or was it all as bad as you expected?
One hears, I suppose, about this mass exodus. You hear about the numbers. And what I went just recently was in with my husband, Andrew Upton, was in Azraq camp and Zartri in Jordan. And also visiting refugees who are in an urban context, who's without UNHCR's help, are obviously in a much more fragile position, in a way less safe than those in the camp. I think what struck me most was the resilience and fortitude and pride. There was one woman I met in the education centre, and she could see you know, a fairly privileged white woman walking through, and she summoned me over and she asked me why I was there. And she asked me what I did, and I told her, well, I said I was here to try and amplify the voices of the refugees, you know, that one can hear these things from afar, but you want to get the human stories back out and to sort of decrease the level of xenophobia that seems to be arising. And she said, well, tell people that Syria is full of strong women who want to rebuild Syria. And the pride, you know, that she doesn't want to be in that camp. She doesn't want to be outside Syria. She doesn't want to be resettled in Europe. She wants to be home, but Syria is not safe.
You know, you just mentioned xenophobia, and it is everywhere right now. You can see what's happening in the presidential campaign in the United States. You can see what's happening in Europe. You know, all of this influx has really created the rise of xenophobia and right-wing parties. But your country also, Australia, is not the most friendly to refugees. What's your view on that?
It is bewildering to me that, you know, we are a signatory, Australia, to the 51, you know, Refugee Convention, and we're a nation, certainly since colonisation, that has founded its identity on immigration and being very receptive and warm to refugees. So it is bewildering what is going on there. And like all countries, Australia needs to do more, to burden share.
Do you think, I mean, look, it gets political. Do you plan to be political? In other words, we're sitting right here in England, and right now there is a crisis because several thousand children who they had promised to bring in are still not being able to come in, Syrian children, refugee children. What do you feel are the parameters of your role?
Well, I think that it's very important that the right to refuge, to sanctuary for people who are fleeing, these are citizens who are fleeing torture, who are fleeing rape, whose children who are literally... I met one family whose her sister, the woman's sister, had died. She took in her 3 children, and they fled because her nieces and 2 of her own children were injured by very unfriendly fire, and they couldn't go to the hospital because if you're injured in a hospital in Syria at the moment, you're considered the enemy. And it's so confusing for those people because they don't actually know who's shooting at them. And they fled in absolute terror. And this is the point, is that these people they're not political. They're not on one side or the other. They are victims and they're citizens.
You connected very profoundly when you were out there. You've just described a little bit of what you saw and what people asked you for in the camp. There was, when you went to the camp, also some acting that was going on. I think you saw a play,
Yes.
some of the children learning how to act. We want to play a little bit and then talk about it.
Ahmed likes to act. And this group of children, about 15 of them, had chosen to create, through a series of scenes, this play about early marriage. And so it was drama as therapy. This community centre and the chance for them to enact their fears, their worries, their stories, their hopes, it became a really important outlet for them.
So obviously you're narrating that piece of UNHCR video, but you're an actress. We have you on the red carpet. You've won Oscars.
Yes.
What do you think for these people who've got nothing, who fled in the circumstances that we've all been reporting and you've seen firsthand now? What does that give them? Is it escapism? Is it something else?
I think it's a way to start to deal with the intense trauma that they have experienced, because obviously these people are not migrants, they're refugees, and there's a very important distinction between those 2 states. If you're migrating somewhere, you have time to prepare your exit and replan your entry somewhere. But if you're a refugee, you're fleeing from, a terrifying situation. And these children have, the amount of stress that they have suffered, losing siblings, losing parents, some of them actually being shot. I saw one, the exit wound of a bullet on a 13-year-old. I've got a 14-year-old in Zaatari camp. And these children, the drama, I think, actually gives them an outlet to tell what's concerning them most. And they're all, this is a middle-class problem. The people in that community centre, the parents of these children that I met, they were architects, they were doctors, they were pharmacists, they were lawyers, they were engineering students. And these children don't expect to be put into an early marriage, but the boys and the girls chose to create that drama around that, because obviously when your family has nothing, arrives with nothing, then early marriage suddenly becomes an option for these people.
You tell me that you told those people there that you want to amplify their voice. You are a world-famous actress, and presumably that's why UNHCR wants you there, to be able to use that voice and that presence. But I just want to also switch gears very, very briefly, because you also are a women's activist for women's rights. You've partaken in several panels. I want to know what you make of your colleagues in Hollywood who want equal pay or better pay for the roles. And we've just been reading that Patricia Arquette, who made a big stance during her Oscar speech, has said that she feels that she's getting fewer roles and she's being more shunned in Hollywood since she made that speech, but that it was a price worth paying. What's your view on that? Because it goes to the heart of Syrian women, every woman being paid equally. Of
course. I did begin to work with UNHCR on the issue of statelessness. And there's 27 countries around the world that don't have equality in their gender nationality laws, so that women can actually confer a nationality on their children. So these children end up, simply because of their gender, their mother not having that equality, these children don't have access to education, they don't have passports, they can't travel. Where do we start? But in relation to what you're asking me, one does begin to wonder what century we're in, that we're even having this conversation. But I think there's a critical mass of women across all industries. And I think Hollywood, yes, it's I don't even know what Hollywood means. I think it's a state of mind. I sort of live between Australia and
directors, studios.
I suppose so. But it does mean exposure. And so it's the pointy end. It's a very exposed industry in that way. But I cannot name an industry where there's equal pay for equal work. And I think that's what people like Patricia Arquette and anyone who voices that is trying to say. And it's also to do with the age window that certainly actors like Judi Dench and Helen Mirren and Meryl Streep and Charlotte Rampling have been expanding those boundaries. But there have been many limitations placed on women, both financial and the creative opportunities. But I think that's beginning to change because it's not just in the film industry; it's across all industries. And I think it's. That's why I wanted to get involved in this. If you have access to an audience, if you have access to authority, then I think you have a responsibility to use that wisely and sensibly, that airtime. And so if you can speak up for actresses of generations behind you, then I think it's important that you do so. And that's, I think, what Patricia said was fantastic.
Cate Blanchett, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. And next, we imagine a world where the curtain comes down on a certain big top performer, the end of an era, but the start of a new life after a break.